Welcome. My guest for today's show is Roy Sciortino, LMFT. I got his name right. Isn't that amazing? Royce is in private practice as a therapist in Los Angeles, and I'm excited to dive into so many different topics. Welcome to the LMFT podcast. I'm your host, TJ Woodward, and I'm thrilled to have you join us for this empowering journey. Each week, we shine a light on the authors, thought leaders, therapists, coaches, and healers of all types who are making a difference in the LGBTQ plus community. Together, we honor those who came before us, the courageous and resilient trailblazers who stood for our rights and recognition. Their strength laid the foundation we stand on today. Here, we celebrate their legacy by diving into the stories, insights, and tools that inspire gentleness, healing, and transformation. So get ready to be uplifted and empowered. This is the LMFT podcast. Royce, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, TJ. And I really, really am appreciative of having me here. It's very generous, and I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Well, thank you. And,
nice.
off without the cameras rolling, you and I have had some really great conversations, and we have a common friend, Betsy Spear, who's going to be on the show too.
Oh, good.
Who's also a therapist. So, I love these conversations, and, there's so many different things we can talk about to lead it off. But one of the topics that I want to talk about, just to kind of kick the conversation off, is the collective traumatic experience that happens within a community that you could consider to be marginalized.
Yeah.
And there's a light and a shadow to that, right? And
Yes.
part of the shadow is kind of a collective agreement that's not conscious on how we kind of respond to life. So I'm wondering where you'd like to start off with that.
Oh, it goes so many different ways for me, and I love it. Thank you for asking it that way. My first hit when I hear that question or that prompt is really to our transgenerational trauma that we don't talk about or really think about, and the way I think about it. And this is opinion. It's not substantiated by research. But when I think of how our community first started to form, like in the late 1800s, right? Where we had in London, in New York, and a little bit on the West Coast, we had our own private language, Polari and stuff like that. And the reason why we had a language like that is to protect ourselves from aggressors on the outside, to establish communication with each other on the inside. But when we think of the risks that happened then, that really continued in some ways, even into my teen years, I remember, that, if somebody was arrested, that person's entire reputation was destroyed, that names would be published, workplaces would be published, families would be blown apart, that the stakes were really, really high for secrecy and privacy, and of course, supporting shame around all of this, right? And if somebody were arrested, same thing happens now when people are arrested for any reason, if it's a collective experience, right, is they will plea bargain. And so if somebody was arrested, okay, we caught you dancing in this place, we'll give you a lower sentence, but who else was with you, right? And that from that sort of traumatic response, what we end up learning non-verbally, pre-verbally, however you think about it, is that the people that we have the strongest desire to get close to are the people that could do us the greatest harm. And that's where I observe and remember experiencing intense fear around intimacy. That's sort of the transgenerational trauma. And I think, to bring up something else, we've talked about briefly, is the bitchy queen. I think the bitchy queen is the best indicator for where we experience oppression. And I'll speak for myself in my teen years where I grew up, drag was very nurturing for community, and the bitchy queen sort of attitude was directed outward because that's where we perceived oppression. And it needed to be there. It was defensive. And I think as we've kind of grown through the AIDS pandemic and then gaining some civil rights, not all of them, and I say that because I don't think we mention that often enough, is that the fight is not over, but the fight is different now. And that where, as a community, where I hope we really go is to really start addressing the fear we have with each other. I've developed another opinion that really, I understand labeling people outside of our sexual minority community. I understand calling it homophobia, but after so much time, it doesn't feel like homophobia anymore. In a lot of ways, it feels like it's a choice. But where we do experience phobia, the fear is right here.
Yeah, and for me,
Here's to each
I'm
other.
yeah, I'm hearkening back to high school, and I'm thinking actually even right before high school, there was a person who shared my backyard, and first of all, he was very hot, and I was very attracted to him, but he also was, I think, really struggling, and he presented as being just very masculine, and we had a couple of encounters. By the way, was a pretty late bloomer sexually, only because I was terrified. So when you're
Yeah.
speaking. I'm thinking about how afraid I was. Obviously, this was way before we had, any kind of apps or any way to hook up in that way. But I know we've been very creative. I just was too afraid to
Hmm.
access some of those creative ways. So I was a bit of a late bloomer. I was almost 18. And this person who, shared the backyard, I had an experience where we were together and I could feel this intense sexual energy. And I remember feeling both it, highly eroticized. Like I was like
Yeah.
very like into it and then also very shame filled and a lot of shame. And, a big part of my story is for the first 10 years of my sort of coming out or becoming a sexual being, if I was ever attracted to someone, I would feel shame. But where this story goes is I never actually suspected that he was struggling with his sexual orientation. So I was very confused by this sort of intense sexual energy. I look back and I think I would have probably handled it a little differently, but I was very
Hmm.
shut down and afraid. The bottom line is there was an accident in his garage with a gun and he died, and he was the only person there. So
See.
I know that Grant most likely, took his own life, and I think about the deep wellspring of shame and what I was experiencing, and I think he and I were experiencing things very differently. He was kind of a jock and he played sports and so like I think his world I was, in choir and band and like I was sort of in my coming out process, but I think about that experience and I haven't talked about that very often, but a few people in my high school chose to end their life.
Ah, see, that just breaks my heart hearing it.
Yeah.
Especially, I just have such a natural affection for people in our community, you know?
Yeah. And
And that what that person learned even before he got to meet anybody in the community, in the family system, and this I think applies to anybody in our alphabet community, that it's not just gay men, it's not just lesbians, that are trans people, that we learn. What my favorite paper that I wrote in school was around attachment um, in family systems and how our community experiences parental rejection
mhm,
compared to other demographics.
yeah.
And of course, it's off the charts for us, that from a very early age, whatever our queerness is, even before it's ever really sexual, right? It's been clocked, it's been identified. And boy, do we learn without maybe even anybody explicitly saying so. Can't do that, can't be that, right? That if a little boy is playing in the living room, and dad's watching football, and he sees those broad shoulders, you can't go, oh my, look at those shoulders. But right? Which would be a totally age appropriate thing for somebody to say because a heterosexual little boy could be like, dad boobs. Yeah, dad boobs. Right. But we learn without any verbal communication, not that, you know. I'm always fascinated by that parental rejection and what the mechanism actually works because then we experience that. We hold it inside. We learn from it. We perfect it, right? That same sort of rejection, and then we bring it into our community and also project it outward.
Yes, and there's two roads I want to go down.
Yeah.
I definitely want to make sure we go down both of them. We're going to bookmark attachment because I think it's really important in what you're talking about. I want to go back to something you said that like most of this sense of something's not okay is not sexual because it
Hmm.
predates that. You know, I was a
Hmm.
4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a
Hmm.
6-year-old, and
Hmm.
mistaken for a girl sometimes, or
Right.
told not to stand that way, not to dress that
Yes.
way, not to talk that
Yes.
way, not to walk that way. And so in my case, it was more around gender norms. And it's changed dramatically since then,
Hmm. Hmm.
how we address this. But back then we weren't really talking about that. It was just like I knew there was something fundamentally wrong with the way I was showing up. I was very fortunate with my two parents, very fortunate in this case that there was never any parental rejection around my orientation. I was
Hmm.
also very fortunate, especially in this time and place in Indiana in the 1960s and 70s, that
Hmm.
my church was the safest place. I had gay role models, etc. Not many of us have that story, but some of us do. But that doesn't mean I didn't experience it when I walked out into the world and, to
Yes.
school and
Yes.
what boys do and what boys don't do. And it does all go back to attachment because we have to go back to that, let's go in a little bit deeper with that. Unless you want
Yeah.
to say something more about what I just said.
I would just like to add that in addition to like questions I like to ask clients, queer clients, when they come in for work, is to establish rapport. Is tell me about, and I don't mean this in a sexual way, but tell me about your early crushes. Who are the people that when you were little make you go, ooh, or for in addition to that, for our trans community of like, okay, who was the first person that you saw? And you're like, that's who I am.
Yeah,
These things that really open up that sort of the part of us that never got to be expressed openly,
that's right.
right? We all have stories. I remember hearing your story, about hugging an uncle,
Yeah,
that like, ah, and then the sledgehammer comes down,
yeah.
right? Mine was, I was a Lucille Ball fan and I love doing shows. But in addition to even the interest, the inquisitiveness, the attraction part that's appropriate for youth, that it's also a worldview. I remember getting into a really weird, confused, not an argument, but just like, what are you guys talking about? These guys that were in a play group that I grew up in, and they were like, let's dig for China. And I'm like, why would they want my grandma's dishes? you know you know and I'm not saying this is the case for everybody, but they really thought that they were playing at digging through the earth, and it didn't occur to me that that was even possible, right? And I'm like, China means dishes. That the way I interpret the world very early on has an
Mhm.
aesthetic to it, has all kinds of things that I personally feel are pretty advanced.
Yeah.
They're worth also thinking about things and experiencing the world in a much more sophisticated way. And I honestly think that part of that, this is the bright side of trauma, if you could say that,
Yeah.
but we develop vigilance, right? And when we're vigilant, we notice more and we identify with more and we seek more. That's sort of my opinion about that. But that's
Yeah.
anyhow, but going into attachment.
Yeah.
Um, I guess what I would say is that unless we have a parent who, was fully accepting and nurturing from the get-go for all of us, not just a part of us, who was able to see us and embrace all of it unconditionally so that we can explore and be mirrored and be seen and be heard with love, all of us kind of have some insecure attachment,
Yeah.
which could be anxious, avoidant, and or of course disorganized, mixed. And that we bring that. I remember, oh gosh, a personal anecdote. The sort of family of origin dynamic that I mirrored in intimate relationships at a very young age was avoidance. I was very avoidant. I learned that my family was not safe, was not okay, right? And on a third date, and I was in my late 20s or early 30s. I can't remember exactly. No, it was late teens or early 20s. Very young. But third date, sweet guy, funny, charming, and he briefly mentioned a future tense. And so a bid for attachment to somebody who's avoidant feels like an invasion,
Mm.
right? Too far, too fast. What are you doing? So this sweet guy said, maybe one day we can go to Magic Mountain. And my response, literally at Tango Grill in West Hollywood, was I put my fork and my knife down and I looked him dead in the eye and I said, you know, I don't need you, right?
Mm.
That's what got me into addressing attachment in therapy, and that's when I first learned it because, boy, that's too much fun. That's too nice. I can't tolerate feeling that good.
Yeah. And having that kind of love, and for anyone who's watching or listening right now who doesn't know about attachment, I like to say things really simply. Like we
Yeah.
all, like you said so beautifully, we all need love and connection from at least one caregiver.
Yes.
And some of us get that. Some of us get that, and then it's severed in some way. Maybe a parent passes away or a divorce happens.
Yes.
Some of us get that in a mixed way, or some of us just don't get that at all, right? Or there's this confusion of like, I remember like an example for me is how much I loved my grandfather and then how overtly racist he was. And like
Hmm.
trying to manage those two things. Like, how can I love him when he's saying these things? And I was confused and hurt and sad. Like I remember hearing it and then trying to like figure that out. And so then we developed these attachment styles. And I agree completely. Like when we don't get that love, that connection, and truthfully, what it is at a deeper level is when we're not seen for who and what we truly are.
Yes, exactly.
And we start to play
Exactly.
these roles or start to like mimic something or mask or create a character. And I think gay folks and anyone in the alphabet, we're really good at creating character because it's a survival. I had to be someone who I wasn't at such an early age and bury parts of myself. And so I think the deeper piece to this, because we often say, well, I replicated this because, I saw this
Hmm.
modeled. The deeper piece to it is I decided and absorbed these huge things about myself. And in my case,
Oh,
with I'm unlovable and I'm
yes.
unworthy. And I don't know how any person doesn't get that who is in our community on some level, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And because of that, that became my vibration and my frequency. And if anyone tried to, I'm definitely anxious avoidant. I've been that disorganized, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, like come here, go away, not too close, right?
Hmm.
And a series of relationships with beautiful people who could not possibly be more unavailable. Not because there was something wrong with them, as we like to talk about in our culture today, but because that was who I was choosing. And I was
Right.
choosing that because that's what I believed I was worthy of. None of this was conscious. I just thought if they could just love me, I could be happy. I could be free.
Right.
But Lynn, just like you said, I remember a date, and I'm going to be, I won't tell you how old I was because I'll be embarrassed to say I'd still had this unhealed part of me at this age. But I went on this date with this person, and he just looked at me and said, "Wow, you're really not available at this moment, are you?" And I mean, he was right. I was so afraid because he was like present and loving and open and the things that you were talking about. I remember that knife and fork situation. Like, oh no, this cannot possibly happen because I couldn't absorb, I couldn't take it in.
Bingo. Exactly.
Take it in.
Absolutely. And like where I think it's really important to also say regarding attachment, because I know it takes up space on social media. I'm personally not on social media, but one of the things I would like to correct is to add hope that,
Yep,
it takes one corrective experience to help people attach securely, that it's totally possible. And that if you do learn and identify with an attachment style, it's not written in stone.
that's right.
And that the way I've seen people use it in social media is, well, I'm avoidant. Well, I'm anxious, and that's the way it is. Well,
Right.
okay, yes, there's room for acceptance, absolutely. But, right, how about if we move into learning how to securely attach and learn how to find safety and comfort and relate to people in a way that helps you deepen your relationship with yourself and them?
Well, and
so that,
what's important about this, and I love that you're saying this, is the attachment style was developed from this sever, right? From this
absolutely.
experience of not being
Hmm.
seen or heard. And so not only did we do the best we could, in my model conscious recovery, I call it brilliant strategy. It's a brilliant
Exactly.
strategy
Yes.
for survival. So yeah, I closed my heart. So I escaped. I ran away.
Bingo.
I became avoidant.
Yes.
That did save me. And so now, though, I want to look at what I truly desire. And I actually don't call it secure attachment. I call it authentic attachment
Oh,
because
sweet.
really to be authentic, but like what you pointed to is so important in the conversation because it's about creating safety within myself. And for me,
Hmm.
it wasn't about letting that love in. In a way, it was more about realizing that I was worthy of that first, and then I could accept that, right? Then I could
Sweet.
securely attach.
This is what I love about parts work in therapy. It's so good for that and really getting to the voices that have never been heard around all of this. I want to also clarify that when we talk about attachment styles, if something originates in the family of origin, it's not always because a parent was unloving or malicious in any way. That it is also partly just how we learn. We bring it's both nature and nurture. Part of it is our, biological preset for it, and the other part is all the epigenetic environmental stuff, and that it's not to judge, it's to repair and really, really find the comfort because it's lovely in there. One of the things, I wouldn't necessarily say this in therapy with somebody, but like when always had I've always been very connected to the community and interacting with youth. And when the tough exterior sort of presents itself, they're a little growly. I love to just like kind of lean in, look at me. I go, "You're so gooey inside. You're just so gooey and sweet inside. And I love it. And I see it. And it's going to be okay." Like the thing that I'm always amazed at whenever anybody goes into therapy or any healing experience is that their light bulb is already turned on. Their instincts are already activated. They're already learning how to relate to themselves in a way that is just beautiful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. It's You've already won by the time you've decided it's time to get help.
I think the importance of this is I was going to say the importance of this is really important. That would be slightly redundant, but it may be that it gets a double important because I know in my own journey, and I see it in the clients I've worked with, we've worked with thousands of people at this point, right? And I see this, it's almost like there's shame about the shame, or there's shame
Uh-huh.
about the
Uh-huh.
strategy, there's shame about the way I've shown up, and I want to be rid of it. I want to be able to attach in the best possible way. I want the finish line. And when I start to have compassion for all those
That.
and how they saved me and how it 99% of the time, the word that when I ask someone, what were you trying to get when you first started this behavior?
Hmm.
Almost always safety, some
Absolutely.
degree of safety, right? And we discovered a way to feel safe, the best our little 6-year-old, 7-year-old, or 8-year-old could do, whether it's singing and dancing or leaving the, leaving the stage,
Yeah.
whatever
Right.
we did, and that becomes an automatic response. And if I'm at war with that, if I'm in the fight on that, it just intensifies. So to be able to love and say, not only I did the best I could, which is a thought, but to really lean in and have compassion. I mean, I remember the first time I really got in touch with when I closed my heart at 7 and what was happening
Hmm.
emotionally and how it was too much for me in the room and how it was too much for me in life and how that protector came in. It felt like it came from outside of me. And
Hmm.
Royce, I was at war with it all through my 20s. I shouldn't shut down. I shouldn't numb out. I shouldn't, all those shoulds. And when I started to have compassion, not only as a 28-year-old or whatever I was, but as the 7-year-old,
Hmm.
that's when things started to really shift.
It's Thank you for saying all of that. It's absolutely true. And that there is also, I want to, if I can, link attachment theory to both trauma
Yeah.
and substance use disorder, if anybody identifies with that, that the features of Oh God, you said authentic attachment. I love that language. If may I please adopt
Of
that
course,
because I love the
please.
language.
Yeah.
is is the features of that are safety, security, and comfort,
Yeah.
right? And that's something we're hardwired to desire. And when somebody experiences something that's traumatic, autonomy's been removed,
Mhm.
information is collected through all the five senses, along with the strong, intense feelings of fear, terror, and horror. Our brain, the part of our brain that responds to trauma, the amygdala and the hippocampus for memories, doesn't know time anymore. And so the thing that's removed is safety, security, and comfort
That's right.
when we are always in a state of um, trauma reactivity. And that's why trauma is worthy of healing. And in terms of substance use, that early on, again, we're hardwired to pursue safety, security, and comfort. And then we learn that we can't in whatever environment we're in for whatever reason, good or bad. And so as young people, we learn to dissociate. We fly into fantasy. And those fantasies, if you explore those, and I love exploring these, is what they all have the features of safety, security, and comfort.
Hmm.
That's what they give us, right? And then when we get to the preteen years or teen years, when social cohesion is really important, that it's really important for us to be seen and heard with the right people at the right time, and we need to be right, and all that horrible preteen stuff that is just so difficult to navigate,
Yeah.
right? Dissociation doesn't work anymore, and that's why we see a lot of people pick up substances
Yeah.
around that age because guess what we feel when we take the first hit of whatever it is that we prefer. We
Safety,
feel
security, and comfort.
bingo, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then, we develop tolerance over time and it just stops working. And if somebody makes a decision to take it away, then what do you get left with is the raw nerves of not having felt it for a long time and then having to relearn at a later age how to
And
do
what's
all that.
what's so fascinating about this is as you're talking, and it's so brilliant what you're saying is, and I'm thinking of my own experience, but also thinking of just like a bunch of clients flash, just the faces
Uh-huh.
of a bunch of clients, that there's this dichotomy of what I want is this safety, this security, this comfort, but it's also the thing that I'm running from because it's too
Yes.
scary, right?
So
And, and
scary.
that's, for me, that's always related to trauma. And I was also sitting with, and I know we've talked about this a lot, and we as a community have talked about this, and I think it warrants a little more leaning into, and that is those tween years, those preteen years, those teen
Hmm.
years that are they're difficult for everyone. So like it's not unique to LGBTQ, but what is unique, I think, within our community, and obviously this is changing, but not everywhere and all the time, is we didn't get to have what the quote unquote normal experience of certain things like sex, like dating,
Yeah.
like because I buried it all. I mean, the first time I hooked up with someone, I hooked up with a friend of mine, and we you know didn't want to talk about it, and then we ended up, I mean, talk about bitchy queen, I ended up gossiping about him.
Yeah.
Right. I
Yeah.
heard he,
There we go.
I literally said I heard he hooked up with a guy
That,
because I
right?
was
There it is.
so terrified to like
Yes.
have
Yes.
anyone see me. And I think back to that and think, wow, that is wild. And I have compassion for that place, that 17-year-old.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Bingo. There it is. Oh, we are at greatest risk with the people that we want the closest connection with.
that's it.
Poof.
Oh, that's so true. Well, and
You-
then what's fascinating. I mean, and I'm just going to reveal my first three sexual experiences, if that's okay, Royce.
Go for it. Go for
So
it.
I went from my friend who was supposedly straight, and I think probably is mostly. We hooked up two or three times, and it was like not at all good and
Hmm.
very shame based, and like him basically saying, "Well, I know you probably want to try this, so I can, be your friend." Whatever. It wasn't true. Then the second person was a 37-year-old and I was 17 and he was cutting my hair and came on to me, and I went to a drive-in and just froze, literally froze. And then the third one was a professional football player. And we had a 1-year affair, which was hooking up. But I mean, it was a very hot experience and shame,
Yep.
secrecy. Like he
Yes.
couldn't let anyone know. I was the first, I mean, I would say it was technically a boy. I don't think I was quite 18 yet, but so much shame and secrecy. So if I look at those three,
Yes.
My goodness. And I know that like this is not unique. Plenty of my heterosexual friends have horrible first sexual experiences, granted, but there's something added to it when it has so much secrecy.
Absolutely. Secrecy and well, and shame, like you described, and we don't get the time, the second adolescence where, when people do start coming out, that we haven't been able to actually experiment with facing, attraction, facing rejection, asking people on dates, and being confused by all the feelings that come with it and all the confusion that comes with it. And it's just a very delicate process. And I have a world of compassion for people who are at that stage. And that's kind of why where I think men and women and trans people and non-binary people, I think it's really important for us to have transgenerational communication so that we create a safety net for the people who are coming in. And one of the things, this is an insight I gained through meditation, actually not that long ago. So in meditation, what I want to get to is just the point that we're creating an aging community right now.
Yeah.
It has not happened before this. We're in the first generation that is on the forefront of figuring out how to age gracefully and how do we reach back and stay connected and how do we create hope for ourselves and ambition, all that kind of stuff. It's really, I think, a beautiful turning point, but like where I kind of had a gut check is, I've had a lot of death in my life, a lot of it due to AIDS. And there's a couple figures in particular that were so important when I was young. They were so, so important. And I kind of keep a conversation going in my head with them, right? And in meditation, when I have those conversations, sometimes I do get an internal voice, an intuitive voice that kind of helps me understand things. And I was just like, I wish you were around because I would love to see how you are handling this age and how I could see you are handling, the age you are now and the way you're going to be. And the internal voice in my head said, Royce, you are more than twice as old as they were when they died. And I'm like, ow, ow. Yeah, this is your job, bud.
Yeah.
Is sort of the takeaway for me. And that's
it's so funny. I mean, it's interesting. I think there's, again, I always see pathways. There's two pathways I want to go down as we move kind of toward the end of the conversation. I feel like we have to have a part two though, Royce, because we didn't even get to some of this. But I remember being in my 20s and making the joke, oh my gosh, we'll have gay retirement homes because and of course now we do, right? And I was picturing what that would look like, right? With
Yep.
And that's just, that's the light and funny part of it in some ways. And then on the other hand, I think there's something that I want to speak to someone sort of my generation,
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of things that are shadow spots that I see, and I'm going to speak specifically to gay men. I think there's an undercurrent with gay men of a certain age that have, I'm not going to call it transphobia. I think that might be too strong. It does exist in some circles. So I want to say there are some who do that. But I think that, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a little older than I am, and he said, the best I don't understand it. But I remember my parents saying to me, I don't understand it about being gay. So I want to try to understand it.
There we go.
And that's really all we're asking here, right? Like, I don't have to like understand a person's experience, but when I'm in the inquiry and the openness to say, let me be curious about this, just like someone was for us, I find it really ironic. And it would be easy to get on a soapbox about like, gay men of my age who fought for rights, and now they're like, oh, but trans people shouldn't be part of our umbrella. So that's a whole thing. But what I also want to speak to, which is interesting to me, well, I guess it is because I'm saying it, but it's interesting because I hear people saying things like, they need to know how much we fought. And I'm like,
yeah, no.
Is that true? Because we were wanting someone, look, I even got a thumbs up from Zoom, to say, we were standing on the forefront so that someone didn't have to have the same experience as we did. So if
Bingo.
someone comes in
Bingo.
and they don't have to experience the pain and the homophobia we did, that's a victory. We don't
Yeah.
necessarily, so there's this interesting balance with all of
There
that.
is, and like one of the things that I think that whole discussion, which needs to be had more and more, and I love being the person around, dinner parties to bring this up, is that really I think the real challenge is just linguistic because trans people have always been part of our community.
Absolutely.
Always. Like I
Oh,
remember in frickin' Pomona, California, there
yep.
was this awesome, awesome cocktail waitress who lived female, full time, assigned male at birth. And if you dared insinuate anything other than that, you'd have hell to pay. And she was just integrated. She was just there. And like it was just so lovely. And one of the things, like when I've done groups around sexual health that includes, our entire alphabet, and I love doing presentations like that. It's not bifurcated anymore. I can do a group for anybody. And I bring in even images of ancient sculptures that are non-binary, that are trans, that are, and then like one of my favorite images, and it's a woodcut, but it's of these two guys assigned female at birth, but they were like badass pirates, like
Yeah.
legitimate pirates in the Caribbean. And they're these two women during the Victorian era, assigned male at birth, and
Yeah.
they were the toast of the town. They were, it's always been here. We're not actually adjusting to anything new because I'm part of the generation that I remember the older generation who was like, I am a homosexual. I am not gay, right? You know, you, right? And like there's all this language that we get caught up in. And I think there's much more room for reflecting on things we already know and just learning the new vocabulary and respecting it. I love these kids and I am so glad. Call it everything, and then get ready because I promise you it's something I never planned for. But in 20 or 30 years, you're going to be experiencing some kids and they're going to have new words for you. you know, I can't wait. I hope I get to see
And they're
the
going to
next
say, you
evolution.
can't say that word anymore. Just
What
like,
do you mean non-binary?
I mean,
Like
queer was such a bad word in my generation, like
that is,
terrible. Like it, so for
yeah,
me to like try to own that word has been a challenge. But it's been a process, right? Because really it's like the interesting part of that is it's so not the word, it is the trauma that's unhealed around that word.
bingo.
And when I do enough of that healing, as we've said, there's no finish line. It's always like, ooh, here's a little bit more. Oh, here's another layer.
Right.
And I think it's in these conversations that allow us to look and see if there's a little more. But like in healing, I mean, we played Smear the Queer when I was a kid, and it
Yeah.
was
Right.
literally like it
We're
was a
talking
big
about traumatic brain injury and a word. Like same thing.
well,
Yeah.
Royce, we're over time. Not that we have to be in time, but I want to invite
Ah,
you back for part two because this
I
has
would
been
love it. It's
insightful and delightful. And of course, I'll give you in a moment, you'll have an opportunity to have your closing thoughts. And of course, your bio and all your contact information will be in the show notes. But this has been really fun for me. And it's also been
thanks.
very insightful. This is one that I will probably go back and watch because there are so many nuggets. So
Thank you. Likewise, I love talking with you. This was lovely. This was really nice. Thank you.
closing thoughts.
Closing thoughts, I think, is just a reiteration of what I said before, is that if you're at a place right now and you're considering therapy, that you're already paying attention to an instinct within yourself that I would encourage you to continue paying attention to, then act on, that is an indication that you already have a tremendous capacity to heal whatever you're experiencing. And I applaud that, I affirm it, and I look forward to seeing the journey. It's beautiful. Yeah, that's my message. You're doing
Amazing.
great. Yeah.
Thank you, Royce. This has been
Thank you.
amazing. We will definitely do a part two. And everyone else, peace and blessings. You know what to do. Share, like, subscribe. If there's someone who you know who would really get something from this episode, please share it with them. That's our request. It does really make a difference. And the difference that I want to lean into with that is, yes, we want people to watch this. Yes, we want the views. But the truth is we want the conversation to get out there. So
Yeah.
thank you for your support and your help with that. And thank you, Royce.
Thank you, TJ. Brilliant.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the LMFT podcast. It's an honor to walk this path of healing and transformation with you. Remember, the courage and resilience of those who came before us live on in each of us. Let's continue to carry their legacy forward as we support one another in creating a world filled with love, gentleness, and empowerment. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we're building a brighter future, one story at a time. Until next time, I'm TJ Woodward, and this has been the LMFT podcast.